Ancient Merv. Merv was once a major oasis city along the Silk Road in Central Asia. Today it's located in modern Turkmenistan, but throughout the years many cultures have claimed Merv for both its riches and strategic value. The city originated in prehistory, with archaeological excavations revealing traces of life back to the 3rd millennium BC. Eventually, it became part of the Achaemenid Empire, and its name was changed to Margu. Later on, in the 6th century BC, Cyrus the Great of Persia changed the city's name to Merv. Going forward a few years, we get to the point where Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire and all of its lands. He allegedly visited Merv, and the locals changed its name to Alexandria for a brief period. But it was changed back, and then was ruled by the people of Seleucid, Bactria, Parthia, and the Kushans. It was basically a revolving door of different cultures coming in and out of the city. From about 220 to 553 AD, Merv became a religious hub for Zoroastrianism, Buddhists, and even Christians. It was a thriving metropolis filled with people from across the region, all practicing different religions in relative harmony. Then, between the 6th and 11th centuries, Merv was the seat of the East Syrian Empire. It was then converted to Islam, and Buddhism and other religions were banished. Eventually, its slow decline began. Now, there is nothing left of this impressive city, or its thousands of years of habitation, except for some crumbling ruins in the desert. Although it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's a far cry from what it once was, a thriving center of politics and culture that was briefly the largest city in the world. The 1540 Expedition. An archaeologist from Tucson, Arizona, has just discovered what could be the oldest European settlement anywhere in the continental United States. Her name is Denny Seymour, and she believes that she may be rewriting history. Denny discovered hundreds of artifacts linked to the Spanish expedition of 1540. Some of these artifacts include pieces of iron, copper crossbow bolts used by the Spanish, medieval horseshoes and spurs, scraps of chainmail armor, and broken sword fragments. But by far, the coolest artifact she has found at the new archaeological site is an old bronze wall gun. The thing is over 3 feet long and weighs about 40 pounds. She found it sitting on the floor of a structure in the Santa Cruz Valley. But she hasn't told anyone where exactly the archaeological site is. She revealed it's no less than 40 miles from the Coronado National Memorial near the San Pedro River. But because she doesn't want people pillaging the site and ruining its archaeological integrity, she won't give out the exact location. The 1540 expedition was led by the Spanish conquistador Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. He commanded over 2,500 Europeans and indigenous allies through Mexico and into the American Southwest. He was looking for treasure, but after 2 years, all he found were dusty American canyons. This new site may just be a place where Francisco and his troops settled down to stay for a while. It wasn't exactly a town, probably more like a military garrison. Even still, this mysterious desert site could be the very first place Europeans settled, even if only briefly, in what is now the United States. Karakoto. Nicknamed the Black City, Karakoto is an ancient walled city in the Gobi Desert of Inner Mongolia. This incredible historic site was once ruled by the infamous Genghis Khan. Dating back to 1032, it was built along the Silk Road and was a flourishing trade center and cultural hub under the Western Xia Empire. During the 13th century, Mongol ruler Genghis Khan began a series of military campaigns to take Western Xia territory. He took Karakoto in 1226. The city adopted the name Etsina and continued to thrive under Genghis Khan's rule. In 1372, soldiers for China's Ming dynasty approached the city and surrounded the Mongol king Karabator. They diverted the Black River, Karakoto's only water source, cutting its plants and population off from much-needed hydration. Then they waited. Weakened by deadly thirst, Karabator's soldiers didn't stand a chance against the invading Ming warriors, who ruthlessly slaughtered everyone within the city's walls. Karakoto was ultimately abandoned and fell into ruins. Protected from looters because of its remote location, the site was rediscovered in the early 20th century. Thousands of texts in the ancient Tangut language and paintings were found. The 5 pagodas and nearly 33-foot-high walls that surrounded the city are still standing,
along with several other crumbling buildings. The castles of King Arthur. There have been many stories about the legendary King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Whether these stories are true or not has been debated for centuries, including many arguments as to where Camelot, his castle, was located. However, there are many real places associated with this legendary king. In southwest England, in the country of Cornwall, Tintagel Castle sits among rugged cliffs on the northern coast of the country. This is where it is rumored that King Arthur was conceived with the help of the magical Merlin. Tintagel Castle is the only location thought to be the birthplace of King Arthur, but when it comes to his infamous court of Camelot, there is a lot of debate. Some people believe that Arthur made his home in Wales at a place called Caerleon, which was an ancient Roman town. This theory makes sense, as Arthur could have used the Roman defenses to his advantage. Other places that might actually be the fabled Camelot include an Iron Age hill fort in Somerset, and some even put the location as far north as Hadrian's Wall, at the site of Roxburgh Castle near Kelso. It's interesting to think that the mythological king that is so associated with England could have in fact been Scottish or Welsh. Although it's still unknown whether King Arthur actually existed, all of the other places are real and packed full of history for you to discover.
Lost Maya Settlement.
During the construction along a new section of the Maya train project in Mexico, archaeologists uncovered a major new site. Over 300 ancient Maya structures were found near Cancun, never seen before, and yet they were hiding right out in the open. In the coming days, the new site is expected to be confirmed as a major Maya city, one that may have been nearly as important as cities like Cancun or Chichen Itza. The Maya Train project is an ambitious new development that will see a train be built between the major Maya sites in Mexico. It will be a way for tourists to go from one ancient city to another without having to do as much traveling. One of the biggest problems the development is facing is that new sites keep being uncovered. This newest unnamed settlement or city, which was found to have buildings over 25 feet tall, is most likely going to force a reroute on the track. Archaeologists have already identified an estimated 25,000 ancient Maya structures since the project began. They've even found new cenotes that may have been used in mysterious Maya rituals and human sacrifices. The train is currently expected to be completed by the end of 2023, but due to the significant delays, it might not be finished until 2024. However, when that time comes, you'll be able to take a train all over Mexico to see all the historic sites.
Gardar. Gardar is a mysterious ancient place in Greenland that was used as the seat of the bishop, who overlooked all the Norse settlements in this part of the world. A wealthy farmer in the area was the one who came up with the idea to have a separate bishop for Greenland in the beginning of the 12th century. The Norwegian king approved the idea, and he sent a bunch of clergymen over from Norway. A man by the name of Bishop Arnaldur took charge in 1126. That same year, he started the construction of a great cathedral devoted to St. Nicholas, the favorite patron saint of sailors. There was a lot of stuff going on around this time with bishops. The newly established Archdiocese of Nidaros was spreading its influence throughout all the islands populated by the Norsemen. This included the Orkney Islands, the Isle of Man, the Faroe Islands, and Greenland. But all the religious influence began to slow down in the later part of the 1300s. By the early 1400s, the Greenland diocese had disappeared completely. The great cathedral built at Gardar by the church was abandoned and left in ruins. All that's there today is the settlement of Igaliku and the ruins of the bishop's church. Stone foundations, crumbling walls, and the remnants of two huge barns once used for storing cattle are the last vestiges of the period of the diocese's influence.
The city of Troy. Troy is undoubtedly a city you have heard of before, maybe mentioned in movies you've seen. But what you might not know is that Troy really did exist in the ancient world, only it went by a different name, one not even remotely similar. The ancient city was called Hisarlik, and it was located on the coast of Turkey. Troy became famous about 3,000 years ago when the Greek poet Homer wrote his epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These poems described Troy as being besieged by the Greek army for over 10 years. all because the Prince of Troy kidnapped the beautiful Queen of Sparta. You know how it goes. And while this all sounds very plausible, keep in mind that Homer's poem was filled with constant interventions by the gods. It sounded like nothing but fantasy. For that reason, most people never believed that Troy was a real place. Even today, there is no real consensus between historians as to if the Trojan War was ever really fought. The city of Hisarlik was occupied as early as 3500 BC. It's also been destroyed and rebuilt countless times. When the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann conducted excavations at the site in the early part of the 19th century, he found pieces of treasure. Heinrich claimed the treasure belonged to King Priam from Homer's epic story, but this was back in the 1870s and was later proved false. The truth is that on the site, there have stood at least 10 different cities throughout history. Troy was probably one of them, but it was built over the bones of another city, and when it was destroyed, another city was built on top, until finally Hisarlik was abandoned in the 13th century. Train Cemetery. On the outskirts of an abandoned transportation hub near the mesmerizing salt flats of Uyuni in Bolivia, there is a collection of rusting locomotives and rotting train cars. Known as the Cementerio de Trenes, or the Great Train Graveyard, the site is the product of a 19th century plan to expand the Uyuni region's train network. The project never came to fruition, as you can see. As the local mining industry began to dry up, developers ran into negotiation conflicts with other countries and experienced increasingly complicated technical problems. The plans ground to a screeching halt, leaving more than 100 trains parked in the middle of the desert. Most of the vehicles were imported from Britain during the early 20th century. They are heavily rusted from the region's salty winds, and they've also been vandalized. The property is open to visitors, many of whom stop by during a trip to the salt flats. A seemingly random train graveyard in the remote, scorching hot climate is strange enough. To make things even weirder, there are several hotels in the region that are made almost entirely out of salt, making a visit to Uyuni anything but ordinary.
Troy.
The Iliad, written by Greek poet Homer, is a series of poems that a lot of scholars know well. Even if you aren't familiar with the Iliad, you may have heard of the wooden Trojan horse, or Helen of Troy, considered to be the most beautiful woman in the world, and was responsible for sparking the war between the Greeks and Troy. The warrior Achilles may also ring a bell for you. This legend of Troy has been passed down over the years and is mentioned in lots of books and films. However, many are unaware that this infamous city was actually a real place. To get to the lost city of Troy, you'll need to head to Turkey. Located on its north coast is the archaeological site that explorer Heinrich Schliemann uncovered in 1870. He found the ruins after setting out on a mission to try and find all of the places mentioned in Homer's Iliad. Set upon a hill, archaeologists found many layers to the city within the rock. The city of Troy, if it existed, was most likely here. But the same spot is home to 8 or 9 different cities built on top of each other over the years, so it's anyone's guess which layer may have gone through the Trojan War. Although it's not known or proven that the Trojan War actually took place, the people of Troy had their fair share of troubles. There's evidence of fires, battles, and even earthquakes occurring at the site. This ancient location still brings in visitors to this day, eager to learn about its history. Do you want to go? I sure do.
The Lost Urartian Kingdom.
Recent archaeological excavations in Turkey's Erzurum province have revealed what appear to be hidden underground sites belonging to the Urartian Kingdom. A settlement, rock tombs, a temple, and even a water tunnel going 150 feet deep were found within a claustrophobic cave system. Researchers believe the underground system was likely a place of great religious significance. The population was quite small, but the cave may have been a popular pilgrimage site for people wishing to participate in funeral ceremonies. Within the dark corners of the cave, researchers found burial chambers and stuffy rooms carved specifically for storing corpses. However, years of looting and destruction has left the place in ruins. The settlement and its chambers are mostly destroyed, and there is very little evidence of what happened here over 1,000 years ago. All we know is the place was most likely built by the Urartian people, an ancient group that rose to power in the 9th century BC. These people lived in dark underground pits, castles carved into the sides of mountains, and all kinds of spooky places in the Armenian highlands. They were eventually conquered and destroyed by the Medes in the beginning of the 6th century BC, ending their rule after 300 years.
The Changbai Mountain Temple. At the foot of the Changbai Mountain in China, there lie the ruins of a royal temple over 800 years old. It was established in the middle of what we call the Jin dynasty, between 1115 and 1234. That makes it the oldest temple ever used by the royal family on this mountain. The destroyed temple can be found in the ruins of the forsaken town of Baoma, just a few miles from the summit of the mountain. Here's why both of these places are important. The Chinese emperors of days past stayed at the town while they performed mountain worship ceremonies at the temple. These ceremonies were known as Fengchan in Chinese and involved the worship of the heavens and the earth. Every new emperor would go to the mountain and give praise at the highest peak. It was a way for them to pay homage to the heavens while receiving the blessing of the mountain. This gave legitimacy to the emperor for however many years they would rule. The most famous mountain where these types of ceremonies took place in China is Mount Tai. Nobody even excavated the ruins at Changbai Mountain until 2013. No one had realized it was an archaeological site, as it was considered a scenic spot for weekend getaways by the locals. Now, archaeologists have found tablets detailing the emperors who visited the mountain to perform their rituals. However, almost all evidence of them is gone. The mountain hasn't been used in any royal capacity for centuries. Imagine learning some scenic picnic or vacation spot you visit was actually a wealth of archaeological knowledge. What would you do if you made this kind of discovery? Let us know in the comments below.
The pyramid city of Caral. There are pyramids in South America just as old as the earliest pyramids in Egypt. They are located in Peru, in the ancient city of Caral. In the year 2600 BC, massive pyramid structures were being built all throughout this sacred city on Peru's central coastline. Archaeologists consider Caral to be one of the biggest and most complicated urban centers crafted by an ancient civilization. In the Western Hemisphere, Caral was without a doubt the most impressive city, rivaled only later on by Teotihuacan, far in the north. There are 6 pyramids here, all of them sitting on a desert terrace looking over the immense floodplains below. The biggest pyramid stands 100 feet tall, its base covering an area of roughly 4 football fields. But there is more to it than just pyramids. There are plazas, at least one amphitheater, and residential areas. Archaeologists have even uncovered flutes made from pelican bones, showing that music was very important to whoever lived here. But the biggest mystery surrounding this ancient pyramid city is that it was abandoned abruptly and for no apparent reason. Even today, archaeologists know pretty much nothing about the civilization that called this place home, or why they left so abruptly after thousands of years of habitation. An immortal plant. The Namib Desert in southern Africa is one of the world's oldest and driest deserts. It's also home to one of the world's longest living plants, known as Velwitschia. This strange species has just 2 leaves, which can grow for thousands of years. The oldest Velwitschia plants are thought to date back at least 3,000 years to the beginning of the Iron Age, according to the New York Times. A recent study examined the species' genome in an attempt to figure out how and why it lives so long. Researchers found that around 86 million years ago, Velwitchia's genome doubled due to a mistake during the cell division process. At the time, the region was experiencing an especially dry period. Extreme conditions like this are often associated with genome duplication, according to lead study author Tao Wan. Co-author Andrew Leach says this resulted in a lot of junk DNA called retrotransposons. Even worse, the expanded genome demanded a lot of extra energy from the plant just to stay alive. Between 1 and 2 million years ago, Velwitschia responded to increasingly harsh conditions by silencing its retrotransposons through a process called methylation. This decreased the amount of energy the plant needed to survive, even with its huge genome. As plant biologist Jim Liebensnack pointed out to the New York Times, the bizarre plant's genetic resilience could possibly provide useful information for improving agriculture, particularly as global temperatures increase. Immortal plant life in the harshest environments? The capabilities of DNA are pretty fascinating. Xanadu. When you think of Xanadu, you might think about the 1980s pop hit by Olivia Newton-John. However, many may be surprised to find out that Xanadu is a real place. Xanadu was the capital of the Mongolian Empire, which was located in modern-day northern China in the 13th century. The first time that the Western world ever heard of the city was from the famous explorer Marco Polo in 1298 AD. The city became shrouded in mystery when it was mentioned by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in his poem called Kubla Khan. Within this work of art, he talks about the luxurious buildings of Xanadu along with streams and geysers spouting water up to the skies, making the city seem like something out of a fairy tale. Some of the descriptions in his poem are definitely true, while other details are extremely exaggerated. There might not be exploding geysers, but there were a lot of springs in the area that the people of Xanadu could use to get water for their crops. It is estimated that around 200,000 people lived in the city at its peak. The poem also talks about the area being luxurious, which is also most likely true. The streets were laid out according to practices of feng shui, and the palace complex was lavishly decorated. The ruins of Xanadu are now considered a UNESCO World Heritage Site. However, for many people, it still remains the mythical city of Eastern splendor, thought up by writers, explorers, and figures from the West.
Ancient China's Venice. The ruins of a massive water city in China were recently uncovered. The city is dated to be about 2,500 years old and may have been similar to Venice in Italy. Amazingly, the ruins were completely buried and nobody knew they were there, sitting no more than 10 miles from one of the biggest freshwater lakes in China, Lake Taihu. Once archaeologists started digging, though, they realized they had something huge. The ruins show a metropolis crisscrossed by a series of canals rather than streets. These citizens were using rivers and streams spread like a labyrinth through the city to get from one place to another. They didn't have solid roads. They had waterways, just like in Venice. Li Guangri, the deputy director at the Wuxi Institute of Cultural Relics and Archaeology, says people stepped straight from their front door onto a boat, then paddled to their destination. The ruins, dubbed the Wuxiabang ruins, cover an area of 800,000 square meters, not even 1 square mile. Still, the city consists of an inner layer, most likely where the local chieftain lived. This inner city was defended by a deep moat and towering walls on both sides. Then there was the outer city, where the nobles and ordinary people lived. And finally, along the watery outskirts was the fringe area, likely populated by peasants and farmers.
Karahan Tepe. If you follow archaeology, you will no doubt have heard of one of the oldest and most mysterious sites in the world, Göbekli Tepe. But there is another place that we rarely hear about called Karahan Tepe. It's located near the border of Turkey and Syria. Karahan Tepe is a village about 11,400 years old, and it could very well change history. Archaeologists have excavated the remains of houses and huge monuments unlike anything else built at the time. It's amazing because the site is over 1,400 years older than the invention of agriculture. It demonstrates that human beings, particularly original hunter-gatherers, were migrating to permanent settlements much earlier than we ever thought. According to Necmi Karul from Istanbul University, the discoveries here are literally changing the perception of every schoolbook in the world. Life in a settlement didn't happen because of farming or animal husbandry. It happened separately, and agriculture came after. This is bizarre because the consensus until now was that agriculture caused humans to stop being nomadic. Now it appears that agriculture is actually the effect rather than the cause of settled life. People only figured out how to start growing crops once they started building towns. The final amazing thing about Karahan Tepe is that it's located less than 30 miles from Göbekli Tepe. The evidence suggests that domestication started here in Turkey over 6,000 years before the Druids of Britain started laying the stones for Stonehenge.
Ancient desert shrine. In Jordan's eastern desert, archaeologists found a mysterious shrine estimated to be 9,000 years old. The archaeological site is located on the Al Jafar Basin, excavated by French and local archaeologists in 2021. They found artifacts and treasures, including tons of marine fossils, weird animal figurines, ancient flint tools and stones carved with weird humanoid features. The altar is part of a large ritual complex. It was also found very close to 2 old desert kites. Desert kites are animal traps used to capture wild gazelle and deer by Jordanian desert dwellers thousands of years ago. The locals would chase animals into the trap made of stone walls, where they would be funneled into the enclosure and then slaughtered. The fact that the ritual complexes were built so close to animal traps shows just how entwined religion and food was for the Stone Age hunters. The biggest mystery now is trying to figure out exactly what rituals took place at this ancient site. Did the Stone Age people bathe in the blood of their kills? Did they offer the captured animals to strange, unnamed gods we've never heard of? Experts have no idea. A lost Libyan civilization. In 2011, scientists revealed the discovery of over 100 ancient fortresses in the Sahara Desert in southwestern Libya. Dating back between 1 and 500 AD, these settlements were inhabited by a mysterious but advanced civilization called the Garamantes. Researchers identified the sites by examining satellite photographs and aerial images dating back to the 1950s and 60s. In 2011, a team of experts traveled to the fortresses, which are located 620 miles south of the Libyan capital of Tripoli. There, they found pottery samples, confirming that the Garamantes once occupied the site. The archaeologists noticed that their buildings were remarkably preserved, but they didn't get a chance to explore as in-depth as they wanted to. Unfortunately, the Libyan civil war cut the expedition short. At first glance, the ruins have a Romanesque feel, but they are not Roman at all, as the architecture belonged to a powerful African kingdom. The ruins were extremely tightly packed, with as many as 10 village-sized settlements being crammed into a 1.5 square mile area, almost like a modern city. Scientific knowledge of the Garamantes is limited. Violence and civil unrest in Libya has prevented thorough research from taking place, and the country has a limited budget for investing in archaeology. Going on what little they have to learn from, experts have determined that the Garamantes had their own writing system. They also made high-quality textiles and were metalworkers. Their most impressive achievement, however, was their advanced irrigation system, which enabled the society to grow plants, even in the middle of the desert. El Dorado. You might be familiar with the animated DreamWorks movie The Road to El Dorado, where 2 down-on-their-luck adventurers end up finding the fabled city of gold. However, the rumors about El Dorado go back further than that, and there may even be a nugget of truth to the tale. The famous city of El Dorado was not mentioned in history books until the early 1500s. Rumors began circulating of a legendary city of gold, whose kings had covered themselves in gold powder and plunged into the nearby lake. Many treasure hunters, hearing this tale, set off for South America, many of whom lost their lives during the search. In 1535, Gonzalo Jiménez de Quesada and his men were traveling through Colombia when they came across the Muisca people who lived by the shores of Lake Guatavita. This was the same tribe of people with kings covered in gold dust. And so, conquistadors did what conquistadors do. They attacked and defeated the Muisca tribe, and afterwards they scoured the depths of the lake in hopes of recovering any riches they could find. They did, in fact, find gold. However, the amount was a lot smaller than they were originally anticipating. As a result, the conquistadors believed that there was no way that this was the El Dorado of legend, and carried on looking. Further expeditions have turned up nothing at all, leading many to believe that El Dorado was nothing but a myth.
British Stone Circle. A mysterious stone circle from the Bronze Age has just been found hiding in a British forest. It was uncovered in the Forest of Dean, which is located in the county of Gloucestershire. This is one of the most famous forests in the entire country, and the stone circle is the first of its kind to be found in the area. It was hiding in plain sight amidst the trees and fallen leaves, although the exact location is being kept a secret. The archaeologists behind the discovery don't want to attract looters or treasure hunters to the site. Although the mysterious stone circle was in plain sight, it wasn't exactly easy to spot. Archaeologists only identified it by using LiDAR technology, and they used lasers to scan the forest, creating a 3-dimensional model of the land. They looked at the Forest of Dean as if every tree had been removed, and this showed them exactly where the stone circle was hiding. Researchers have done these same things to uncover lost cities in the jungles of Central America. John Hoyle is the archaeologist who identified the circular formation. He first thought he was looking at a World War II gun placement, but after a bit more investigating, he realized it was significantly older. The site is in fact a prehistoric stone circle made about 4,200 years ago. It's roughly 80 feet wide, with banks measuring 16 feet thick. There are ruins of 10 standing stones made of limestone, slowly being eroded by vegetation. For now, the stone circle is a major mystery. It's unclear if this had something to do with astronomy, if it was used for ceremonial purposes, or if it was an ancient burial ground. Maybe it was all three.
Ancient synagogue. Archaeologists working in Israel have discovered a synagogue from over 2,000 years ago in a large Jewish village along the Sea of Galilee. The village is called Migdal, and it was used in the First Jewish War as a rebel base. That was when the local Jewish population rose up against the might of Rome. This newest structure is the second synagogue found from the Roman period in the village. It's also the first example of two synagogues existing in a single locality from this time. This was back when the Second Temple of Jerusalem was still standing, before the Romans tore it down in 70 AD. Practicing Judaism wasn't really high on the priority list for the Romans. When they invaded what is today Israel, they tried their hardest to snuff out all the Judaism they could. It was one of the reasons the Jewish people fought back so hard against their oppressors and ultimately won. But what's interesting about this synagogue is that it shows just how important daily worship was, even under the thumb of Rome. The synagogue was found just a few hundred feet away from an earlier one discovered in 2009. Archaeologists with the Israel Antiquities Authority also uncovered old streets, a ruined marketplace, the remains of an industrial facility, and traditional Jewish baths.
Ancient Ukrainian fortress. The ancient castle city of Bilhorod-Kievsky can be found in modern-day Ukraine. It rose to power as a great and important city in the 10th century, then was destroyed only 300 years later. The only thing left today is a small archaeological ruin near the Ukrainian village of Bilohorodka. Still, this place was once the largest fortress in the region. The story of the castle goes back to the year 980, when the leader of the Kievan Rus, Vladimir I of Kiev, built a castle for himself. It was used as his own residence and to protect the city of Kiev from the fierce nomads of the Great Steppe. As the years went on, the castle became the seat of the local bishop. In the 12th century, it became a fortress city, and in the 13th century, it was ruined. The castle's demise came when the Moguls invaded the region of Kievan Rus. Now here's an interesting piece of history. Up until the Mogul invasion, the land was ruled by a medieval federation of East Slavic tribes. After the Moguls came and slaughtered everyone and destroyed everything, the land was divided into three major pieces. These pieces went on to become Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. The fortress city was toppled and forgotten. Aralum Desert Ship Graveyard. Before the 1960s, the Aral Sea was the world's fourth largest inland sea. Once home to a thriving fishing industry, it straddled the border between modern-day Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. That all changed when the Soviet Union diverted the two main rivers feeding the sea to supply farms with water. The once vast body of water began to rapidly dry up, leaving behind a salty, poisonous wasteland in its wake. As the sea shrunk, its salt content reached toxic levels and killed off its marine life. With no more money to be made from fishing, people began to hightail it out of town for better prospects elsewhere. Most of what was once the Aral Sea is now the Aralum Desert, and it's littered with dozens of rusting fishing boats that former residents abandoned. The decaying ships represent the distant memory of a place that once had a thriving economy before it was replaced by the desolate and eerie scenery that gives the feeling of some kind of post-apocalyptic movie set. Most of the ghost ships sit at the edge of former harbor cities and seaside towns, near clusters of derelict buildings. The few people who still live in the area are plagued by health problems from the toxic dust that blows around. But in a surprising turn of events, the Aral Sea is once again being fed by the rivers that were diverted away from it. Its salt content has decreased, and fish have returned. For now, it's uncertain whether the sea will be restored to its former glory, and perhaps replace the depressing sight of rotting ships. The Bermuda Triangle. In December 1945, a group of U.S. bomber planes set off from their Navy base and started to fly over the coast of Florida toward the Atlantic Ocean on a routine bombing practice mission. Their lead pilot somehow became disoriented, and as they were following him, so did the crew. They were never seen or heard from again, and even the plane that was sent to rescue them disappeared as well. These pilots are just one example of the many other people that have gone missing in the area called the Bermuda Triangle. This place has claimed at least 50 ships and 20 airplanes that we are aware of. Stretching between Florida, the Greater Antilles, and Bermuda, after which it is named, the Bermuda Triangle is a stretch of sea that seems to swallow up travelers and their vessels, making them vanish without a trace. Scholars and scientists have often wondered why this location is so deadly and question if its mysterious effects are even real. Over the years, many theories have emerged as to why strange things happen here. Some people believe it is alien activity, the lost city of Atlantis, or even sea monsters that cause the phenomenon. Others suggest it could be due to magnetic fields or gravitational disturbances. Either way, the true reasoning remains unknown, and many planes and ships still avoid passing through the dangerous Bermuda Triangle to this day. What do you think is really going on there? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.
The dried Euphrates and Tigris rivers. A brutal drought currently affecting the land that was once Mesopotamia is revealing ancient structures hidden in plain sight. The water levels of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers have been dropping steadily for the last few years. As the water levels of these famous rivers decline, dozens of archaeological sites are appearing. Many of these sites date back to the dawn of civilization. Archaeologists found a burial site from the days of the Byzantine Empire in Syria, on the bank of the Euphrates Dam. Researchers have also discovered much older grave sites that date back to the Assyrian Empire. Mohammed Jassim, an archaeologist from Iraq, says the decrease in the water has revealed at least 80 historical sites that had previously been submerged. The lost city of Zakiko from the Mitanni Empire revealed itself in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, right at the edge of the emptying Tigris River. Archaeologists descended on the place as quickly as they could. They found the ruins of an ancient palace, an old wall, and cuneiform text. This city was likely built around the year 1500 BC in northern Mesopotamia. The discovery was huge because very little of these people's history is known today. Few Mitanni archaeological sites have been found, and almost nothing in the way of written records exists. They were called the Hanigalbat by the Assyrians and the Naharin by the Egyptians. The Mitanni was possibly one of the greatest empires in the world in 1500 BC, likened to that of ancient Egypt, but historians believe they were destroyed by the Assyrians around 1245 BC. And now for number 5. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Amy Midgard and Hez Niguna for watching and supporting this channel. If you are new here, remember to hit that subscribe button and join the Origins Explained family.
Superhenge. The remains of an almost impossibly giant stone monument have been found just 2 miles from Stonehenge in England. The monument, believe it or not, is over 15 times the overall size of Stonehenge. For this reason, British archaeologists have named it Superhenge. It's like the Stonehenge we all know and love, only on some major steroids. The monoliths that make up the monument were discovered buried underground. Researchers think they may have had something to do with Stonehenge and may have made up a Neolithic landscape unlike anything previously imagined. What this would mean is that Stonehenge wasn't alone, but was part of a much larger network of ceremonial plazas and ritual centers visited by people from all over. Sadly, the true mystery of this place is unsolved. Nobody knows when the stones were put in the ground or how they were used. They were demolished and buried a few thousand years ago, but it's unclear why. The stones may have been toppled by accident, or they may have been torn down on purpose. The only thing we know for sure is that 4,500 years ago, Stonehenge was not the only significant arrangement of rocks in a field. There were tons of these, many of which were significantly larger. And yet, despite the fact that archaeologists have found so many henges, they still know almost nothing about them. Why do you think the ancient people of Britain were so obsessed with building circles of stone? Let me know your theories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos coming up.
Ancient Pakistan. Pakistan's history goes back over 5,000 years, even before the pyramids were built in Egypt. And yet most people can't name a single archaeological site in the country. This was really a cradle of civilization, home to the Mehrgar culture of 7,000 to 2,500 BC, the Indus Valley culture of between 2,500 to 1,500 BC, and the Gandhara culture that thrived until just 1,000 years ago. The archaeological site of Mehrgar was discovered in 1974 by a group of French archaeologists. Experts say it was home to a highly developed civilization from 8,000 years ago. That makes it one of the oldest permanent settlements in South Asia, and even shows evidence of farming, metallurgy, and the practice of dentistry. Way before the Mesopotamians or the Egyptians were even functioning, people in ancient Pakistan were going to the dentist and farming land. The site is over 30 hectares and was continuously occupied for about 5,600 years. Pakistan is also home to the archaeological site of Raman Deri, unearthed in 1971 by Professor Ahmad Hassan Dani. Archaeologists believe this was the earliest planned urban city. What this means is that around the year 4000 BC, some people sat down and planned the city's layout before putting down the first bricks. Film City. If you drive several hours from Qatar's capital city of Doha into the Qatari desert, you might stumble upon a deserted, ancient-looking Bedouin-style village filled with minarets, a mosque, and mud brick houses with wooden doors. The exact explanation behind its presence is somewhat of a mystery, depending on who you ask. Known as Film City, the site is thought to be an abandoned film set that was built for a TV series or a movie. It was once a fishing village, but was apparently abandoned during the 1970s. In 2009, the village was partially rebuilt, presumably for filming purposes, although the stories vary and nobody seems to know what to believe. The deserted nature of Film City is eerie enough on its own, but it gets even creepier when you think about the vast, seemingly limitless desert that surrounds it. Visitors are unlikely to see a car drive by or cross paths with another human, except for the security guard who oversees the property, and getting there requires a four-wheel drive vehicle. And now for number 4, but first want to give a big shout out to Britannia Renee and Ashley O. Thanks so much for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos about amazing and mysterious discoveries. Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus has long been considered the home of Zeus as well as the other major Greek gods. Here, Zeus is thought to have reigned supreme, watching over civilization below. By his side is said to have been his jealous wife Hera, as well as the entire pantheon of gods and demigods, such as Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Ares, the god of war. Because Mount Olympus is drenched in ancient lore, a lot of people might assume the place is nothing but a legend. However, many would be surprised to find out that Mount Olympus is a very real place, located in Greece. Granted, nobody has proof that any gods reside there, and lightning bolts don't come shooting down to smite people from the vengeful Zeus. However, you could understand why so many people thought this was a suitable location for deities to be living. The sheer size of Mount Olympus measures 9,570 feet tall, which would have meant it was definitely an imposing sight to the ancient Greeks living down below. Its many peaks are often either covered in snow or hidden among the clouds, so it would have been easy for the Greeks to imagine gods scheming from up above. There are surprisingly 3 notable mountains with the same name out there. The one I mentioned in Greece, one in nearby Cyprus, and Olympus Mons, the tallest mountain on Mars.
Obsidian mines. Archaeologists have identified over 500 ancient obsidian mines in central Mexico. These old mine shafts, hidden in plain sight surrounding the area of Teotihuacan, were once mined by the citizens of that strange city. These shafts are spread throughout a mountain range called the Sierra de las Navajas, or the Mountains of the Knives. Nobody knows who inhabited Teotihuacan, only that they were an incredibly powerful society that likely practiced blood sacrifice. They prospered near Mexico City for centuries, then vanished abruptly without any discernible reason. However, before they abandoned Teotihuacan around the year 700, They ruled it as kings. One of the major industries of the city was obsidian, taken from the mines and then refined in workshops. Obsidian was one of the most important materials throughout Mesoamerica since at least the 1st century AD. Obsidian is formed from lava cooling after it's expelled from a volcano. It's black volcanic glass, also known as dragonstone, and Mesoamericans used it for everything. Since they didn't have advanced metallurgy skills, they didn't work with iron or any other complex metals. Obsidian was the best they could get. They used it in rituals, for making knives and weapons, and in their homes. These newly discovered mines were found in the forest, and their entrances were partly covered by overgrown weeds and bushes. But nobody purposefully tried to hide them. They were likely exploited by the people of Teotihuacan, then mined once more between 950 and 1150 AD by the Toltecs, who came after.
Ancient Buddhist temple. Italian archaeologists discovered the foundation of the oldest sacred Buddhist structure in Pakistan. It comes from the Mauryan period in the 3rd century BC. About 100 years after the foundation was laid, the temple underwent major reconstruction. And then the Greeks arrived shortly after that, when Alexander the Great came conquering through the area. When King Menander came into power around 200 AD, he enhanced the temple and kept it functioning. It was used as a place of worship until the 4th century AD, when it was abruptly abandoned. At that time, it was in the Kushan city of Basira, and that city was destroyed by an earthquake. The temple, along with pretty much every other structure in the area, was demolished in a matter of seconds. Nobody ever rebuilt the temple, and so it was swallowed by the desert. Only now have modern researchers finally found this little piece of history. It's fascinating because it shows that Buddhists had a strong presence in this part of the world ever since the 3rd century. It also shows that the Indo-Greek rulers that came after Alexander supported Buddhism. For the few centuries that people worshipped at the temple, religious freedom was much more relaxed. People of different beliefs came and went, and people were much more tolerant. Some scholars believe this was a residual effect of Alexander's tolerance and multiculturalism, which was part of his vision for a more united world. Surbani Yas Church. On Surbani Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, a very old church was discovered in the early 1990s. Archaeologists uncovered a monastery, a church, and several houses from the 7th century AD. The site proved to be quite intriguing for archaeologists because it showed the first evidence of Christians living in the United Arab Emirates. There wasn't a lot left of these structures, mostly just the ruined foundations, but it was enough for archaeologists to connect the buildings to other ancient churches and monasteries built in the Arabian Gulf over 1,000 years ago. Plus, they found lots of artifacts. Researchers uncovered glass and ceramic objects which linked the inhabitants to other civilizations across the Arabian Gulf. They also found evidence that the people here were keeping cattle, sheep, and goats. In other words, they were farmers and traders and had a pretty good lifestyle going on here. The Christian buildings suggest they were part of the Church of the East. It's quite rare to find a church built in the 6th or 7th century in the UAE because Islam already dominated the region. Researchers say it goes to show just how tolerant and accepting the early Islamic leaders were. But as you can tell by the absolute destruction of this whole archaeological site, that tolerance did not last forever. Old Skagen Church. Sometime between 1355 and 1387, a Gothic-style church dedicated to St. Lawrence of Rome was built just outside of Skagen, Denmark. Known as the Old Skagen Church, it belonged to the Danish crown until 1459, and it is one of the area's oldest buildings. Over the centuries, the region underwent a process called desertification, which is kind of what it sounds like. Sand swept in from the nearby Rabjerg Mile Dune and began accumulating around the brick church. By the late 18th century, the building's entrance became buried regularly. Whenever they wanted to attend a service, worshippers had to dig their way in through the sand. Eventually, the problem became too much to deal with. The church's contents were removed to protect them from damage, and in 1795, Denmark's king allowed the church to close. Most of the structure is either destroyed or buried. All that can be seen today is the main tower, which sticks up out of the sand.
The National Museum of Denmark owns the site and maintains the tower as a navigational landmark. Very limited excavations have been carried out on the rest of the building. Local authorities believe that the floor and altar are still there, swallowed by sand, but they haven't investigated to confirm their suspicions. Babylon. Babylon is often seen as one of the ancient cities of legend. You might have heard about its famous hanging gardens, which created a green oasis in the middle of the dry and arid desert. Otherwise, you might know the song Rivers of Babylon, or could have even read about it in the Bible. However, the ruins of this great civilization can still be found to this day in northern Iraq. Back then, Babylon was huge as far as ancient cities go. For an idea of the sheer size of it, the closest modern comparison is the city of Chicago in the United States. Chicago is far from a small place, measuring 234.5 square miles. Babylon was a great metropolis with large temples, beautifully decorated palaces covered in tiles, and bustling streets. It's believed the Hanging Gardens were part of a temple, which some think was the inspiration for the Tower of Babel from the Bible. One of the more amazing things about this city was the wall that surrounded it. This was far from the walls of your regular house. In fact, 2 chariots each, led by 4 horses, are said to have been able to pass one another on the road on top of the wall. Sadly, Babylon's greatness did not last forever. In the 2nd century BC, the great city was sacked by the invading Parthians and left to crumble into ruin. The site is still protected by UNESCO, but remains a shadow of what it once was.
The Great Irish Bog. Ceide Fields is an archaeological site in Ireland that's older than the pyramids of Egypt, but you wouldn't recognize its historical significance just by looking at it. To the untrained eye, Ceide Fields is about 5 square miles of bog. It's nothing but a swamp in Western Ireland, with a few soggy trees that are surrounded by low hills. It looks absolutely empty, and would likely be a bad place to find yourself on a foggy night. In reality, the creepy bog was once home to an ancient society. In the 1930s, a school teacher was cutting peat when he came across the remains of a Neolithic site. Researchers soon descended on the swamp, finding some of the oldest stone-walled fields in the world. According to National Geographic, the village stood here in 3800 BC, dating back to nearly 6,000 years ago. Back then, Ceide Fields wasn't a swamp, but solid ground. A group of mysterious humans likely farmed the land here, living behind the protection of their tall stone walls. Then, as time wore on, the people fled the area, and decaying plant matter mixed with watery soil erased most evidence of them. Their structures were eventually buried in the bog. It wasn't until 1963 that a team of archaeologists undertook a real investigation. They uncovered primitive tools, arrowheads, and collapsed walls that had once protected a surprisingly organized and sophisticated agricultural community.
Maya city of Koch. Researchers investigating the ancient Maya city of Koch have made some pretty interesting discoveries. This city once boasted a giant pyramid, as well as plenty of pieces of complex Maya architecture. And to make it even more interesting, the buildings and the pyramid, in fact the entire city, were built over a cave system. The cave system was key to helping the civilization survive. Recent mapping of the caves revealed a huge network of reservoirs and cisterns directly connected to the underground water table. This meant the community had an almost endless supply of fresh water, allowing them to thrive, and it also allowed them to experience a population boom. Exploration into the underground caves revealed many strange and wonderful things. Archaeologists found broken shards of pottery, artifacts from everyday life, and the charred remains of sacrificed victims. The insane number of bodies found in the caves indicates that it was a religious site where Mayans worshipped the rain gods. Nicholas Dunning, a professor from the University of Cincinnati, says the cave system beneath Koch was in continuous use from between 800 BC until the 19th century. It was also the biggest city in the region for centuries, only abandoned in 300 AD after their caves dried up and all the water was gone. Would you like to explore the caves beneath this ancient city? Let me know in the comments. Ancient French city.
Excavations done by experts with the University of Toulouse-Jean Jaurès in France have revealed a mysterious fortified settlement. This settlement may represent a lost Celtic capital city from the Bronze Age. Archaeologists have uncovered jewelry, pieces of a chariot, and tons of weapons. They've also found farming tools and extremely valuable items, all buried on the settlement grounds. The items were hidden beneath the earth around the year 800 BC, probably as part of a religious ceremony. But let's back things up a bit. The mysterious hill fort was found in Gannat in central France. Excavations began in 2017, with archaeologists slowly realizing this was a major site. It was likely a thriving hub of Celtic activity 2,800 years ago. There was farming here, manufacturing of textiles and ceramics, and skilled metalworking. The researchers also discovered plenty of signs of wealth. Chariots, harnesses decorated with jewels, glass beads imported from Italy, and axe blades fashioned in England. But here's something you might not know. There are 327 hill forts from the Bronze Age scattered throughout France. This newest one has yielded the largest assortment of treasure. Only a handful of other forts have given up any artifacts at all. It now looks like this may have been the capital of the Celts living in France before it was ever France. The other hill forts were just secondary settlements. Huge prehistoric cemetery. While hunting for dinosaur remains at a site called Gobero in Niger in 2000, a group of scientists stumbled upon a large human graveyard dating as far back as 10,000 years. It's the biggest known cemetery ever found in the Sahara. In addition to around 200 human graves, the remains of fish, crocodiles, and other animals were buried there. Evidence indicates that the site was occupied during two different periods separated by a 1,000-year gap. The groups that lived there, the Kiphians and Tenarians, left behind an array of grave goods in addition to the remains buried at the cemetery. Researchers have learned a lot about what day-to-day life was like for people from these groups based on the artifacts, which include bone jewelry, arrowheads, and harpoons. There were numerous bizarre burials, including a man whose head was placed in a pot, and another who was laid to rest on top of a turtle shell, as well as a woman who was buried facing two children. The women and two children were likely buried on top of a bed of flowers, as evidenced by pollen found in their graves. Even more strangely, the tools and animals at Gobero seemed out of place for the modern Sahara climate. This is because they originate from a time known as the period of the Green Sahara, also known as an African humid period, during which changes in the Earth's orbit brought more rain to the region, resulting in an uptick in vegetation, water, and the life forms that come with it. Pretty amazing what can be learned from burial sites, even details about dramatic shifts in climate over time.
Ancient Native American Canal. Archaeologists have just dug up an ancient Native American canal in Alabama. The canal is about 1,400 years old and was found in the beachside resort town of Gulf Shores. The canal has been out in the open for a very long time, mentioned in records as far back as the 1820s. United States Army engineers recognized it back then as an artificial feature from before European settlers. But nobody ever bothered to investigate the gigantic trench until now. One of the biggest issues when it came to investigating the canal was that there are a lot of features that look similar in the swamps around Mobile. Many of the features were left behind by cultivation and logging, and so archaeologists never wanted to waste their time. It wasn't until 2017 that Gregory Wassilkoff took a look for himself. Gregory and a team of volunteer archaeologists identified the feature as a rare example of Native American engineering. It's nearly a mile long and was built specifically for canoe travel. It was an old waterway connected to the Gulf of Mexico to allow easy fishing in coastal areas. It also allowed for easy trade, so that merchants could travel up the Gulf and then paddle their canoes inland instead of marching through the swamps. Gregory now says the canal, forgotten for centuries, is a perfect example of Native American ingenuity. Things like this helped the natives of Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana flourish for thousands of years. There had likely been a small woodland village right at the edge of the canal, and it would have seen a lot of traffic, but sadly, there is no sign of that village today.
The Chinese Mountain Pass. There is one spot along the Great Wall of China in the Shanxi province that is particularly interesting. It's a choke point between the mountains, used for centuries to block the nomads from the north. keeping them from invading. It's a strategic passage and arguably one of the best natural defensive positions anywhere in the world. This is the Janman Pass, and it's been witness to thousands of horrifyingly bloody battles ever since 476 BC. It was originally nicknamed Wild Goose Gate because the mountains that rise up to either side of the pass are too tall for birds to fly over. This meant no message could get from one side to the other. The only way to communicate with someone on the other side of the mountains was to go directly through the pass. When the Chinese figured out just how important this passage was around 2,500 years ago, they began building fortifications. They built a protective wall through the pass, then 3 more giant stone walls, along with 25 smaller walls as barriers. They essentially made this location one of unbreakable defenses. There were military camps here during the Ming Dynasty between 1368 to 1644. Lookout posts were erected, trenches, fortresses, and even beacon towers. This is still one of the best preserved parts of the Great Wall of China. A section of about 15,000 feet is still in near perfect condition, with its walls nearly 30 feet tall. The palace beneath the Forbidden City. China's Forbidden City has housed 24 Chinese emperors throughout history. And while many people have heard of the Great Forbidden City in Beijing, most haven't heard of what's hiding underneath it. You see, the Forbidden City was built over the bones of an even more ancient palace from the Yuan dynasty. The original palace was built by none other than Kublai Khan, descendant of Genghis Khan. For at least the last century, archaeologists have wondered where the ruins of the old palace could be. They knew the palace was somewhere beneath the ground of the Forbidden City, but could never figure out where. It wasn't until 2016 when experts from the Palace Museum announced the discovery of foundations from the 13th century. They were found right in the center of the Forbidden City, dating to the last days of the Mongol Khans. This is fascinating because it proves that roughly 2 centuries before the Forbidden City was constructed in the early 1400s, Kublai Khan had his own palace standing in its place. That palace was torn down, and the Forbidden City that came to be the seat of emperors for 600 years was built directly on top of it. An abandoned prison. In 1952, the U.S. government built the Boron Air Force Station in the Mojave Desert. Located in Kern County, California, the site remained in operation until 1975, when it was decommissioned. 4 years later, the abandoned collection of buildings was turned into a federal prison. Boron Federal Prison could accommodate up to 540 prisoners and had 25 units for staff members. There were several industrial buildings at the site where inmates assembled military vehicles and repaired forklifts for the U.S. Army. Like many low-security prisons, Boron had barrack-style housing instead of actual cells. But the facility was unique because it had almost no security, even compared to other minimum security prisons. It wasn't surrounded by a fence, there were no guard towers, and the doors didn't lock. But why? The property was so remote, the prisoners generally weren't dangerous to the general public, although there were a few instances where inmates escaped. Boron closed in 2000 amid budget cuts, and the building that housed the inmates was demolished in 2018. Several decrepit buildings are left standing at the site, which is still owned by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. They're in a noticeable state of disrepair and are not exactly safe to explore, so trespassing is strictly prohibited. Dracula's Castle. When you think of a vampire, you're most likely going to say Dracula. In Bram Stoker's novel of the same name, Count Dracula is a fearsome vampire from Transylvania who had an imposing castle high up on a hill looking down onto the village below. This is a scene you'll be all too familiar with from a lot of horror-themed movies, TV shows, and games. But does Dracula's castle actually exist? Or is it a work of fiction? Bram Castle is a real place in Transylvania, and it is commonly known as Dracula's Castle today. It is located in the commune of Bran in Brasov County and is highly marketed as the residence of the title character from the book. Bran Castle is the only one in Transylvania that matches the author's description, and although he never visited Romania, he is said to have based the imaginary Dracula's castle off of an illustration of Bran Castle from the book Transylvania, Its Product and Its People, written by Charles Bonner.
The whole vampire thing may not be real, but it's interesting to note that the people of the nearby area have some superstitions of their own. They believed that certain people, who they call strigoi, lived regular lives during the day, but at night their spirits left their bodies and haunted the village, torturing its inhabitants until sunrise. That sounds terrifying, to say the least, and it's said that the Dracula character was derived from these local legends. Area 51. The government has confirmed that Area 51 is a completely real place. However, it's located somewhere that is completely shrouded in mystery. This military installment has long been the subject of conspiracy theories, including aliens and advanced technology. Area 51 is located in the deserts of Nevada in the USA and is a classified U.S. Air Force base. There are many theories as to what goes on here, with the most popular one being that aliens are kept and contained at the site. You can't fly over it, and despite being built in 1955, it was only officially recognized as recently as 2013. That's enough to make anyone wonder what's going on there. Area 51 covers a patch of desert that is over 2.9 million acres in diameter. That's a whopping 4,531 square miles. It covers such a large area of land that it's no wonder why people have so many conspiracies about it. In 2019, a group of people got together and decided to storm Area 51. They planned to find out just exactly what was happening there. Thankfully, it all ended up being a joke, and nothing really happened. If folks did try and get into the military base, they'd most likely have a bad time, especially since the area is heavily guarded. The official use for Area 51 is documented as a place to test and develop brand new aircraft and spy planes. This would seem to make sense, as satellite images show a runway over 2.3 miles long. However, it hasn't stopped the place from being the target of theories and myths still to this day.
Okunoin Cemetery. Japan's Okunoin Cemetery is located high up in the mountains of the Wakayama Prefecture. It's a few hours from Osaka, accessible only by car and not a typical spot on any tourist trail. On the outside, it looks like an ordinary cemetery. There are long avenues winding through gravestones, stone lanterns, and the statues of long-dead people. The cemetery is also located in the forest, with towering trees rising above the grave plots. It's a beautiful place on its own, but a lot more mysterious when you realize it's also an archaeological site. The Okunoin Cemetery holds the remains of more than 200,000 Buddhist monks, all of which are supposedly waiting to witness the resurrection of the future Buddha. The cemetery is also the biggest in Japan and has been around for over 1,200 years. It's considered sacred ground and is nestled inside one of the oldest areas in the country. It's in the forested region of the Kii mountain range and part of an ancient pilgrimage route through the multiple Shinto cemeteries and shrines, all connected to the old days of Imperial Japan. Buddhism was introduced to the region in 805 AD, and this cemetery came to life soon after. The followers of Shingon Buddhism don't believe there are any dead people in the graveyard. However, they do think it's full of happy and peaceful spirits, still awaiting the return of the Buddha.
The Plain of Jars. There is nowhere on Earth quite as mysterious as the Plain of Jars in northern Laos. The landscape here is littered with large gray sandstone structures that at first glance could be mistaken for abandoned wells. From above, they pockmark the area in clusters that sometimes resemble barnacles, but in fact, they are broken burial jars, many of them over 2,000 years old. The jars, seemingly discarded at random throughout a field, are made from sandstone. They are absolutely enormous. They were used by whichever ancient people lived here to bury their dead. A person's remains would be placed into the jar and exposed to the elements until nothing was left except their bones. Then the bones would be buried separately. Louise Shewan from the University of Melbourne says the jars had something to do with ancient rituals. They were used for a span of about 500 years before the practice abruptly ended. What's really strange is that who used them or where they went remains a mystery. There was an ancient tribe of people in the area who became obsessed with giant jars and the death rites of their deceased. Then, as quickly as they arrived, they left. When they abandoned the area, the evidence of their ritual burials remained behind. They also left behind almost no evidence of who they might have been. Archaeologists have found no nearby cities or other structures, and there's nothing here except hundreds and hundreds of huge jars, almost as if they fell from the sky.
The city of Ur. The ruins of Ur in Iraq are some of the most important in the world. Ur was a city in ancient Mesopotamia, ruled over by the Sumerians. It has close links to the Bible. Abraham is said to have been born here, and it is home to the largest ziggurat-style pyramid still standing. But what's really amazing is that the city goes back to the very beginning of human civilization, starting as a small village around the year 5000 BC. It was inhabited for at least 1200 years before establishing itself as a city. The city was excavated in 1922 by the archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley. He discovered a massive grave complex, a series of royal tombs, and evidence of the Great Flood described in the Bible. Much like many ancient cities, Ur was occupied by several different civilizations. Ur became the seat for the hero kings of the Akkadian Empire from between 2334 and 2279 BC. Sargon the Great claimed to be born from a priestess and a god, and proclaimed the holy ruler of all Mesopotamia. In its final days, Ur was part of Old Babylonia. It was considered the center of learning and culture in all the ancient world. People traveled here from distant lands to study and worship the many gods of their time at Ur's dozens of temples. The city was even inhabited into the Achaemenid period until 330 BC. But overuse of the land, massive immigration from other parts of Mesopotamia, and climate change resulted in the city's desertion. It was covered in sand and not seen again until 1625.
Lake Dolores Water Park. During the 1950s, a California businessman named Bob Myers built a private water park for his extended family off Interstate 15 in Newberry Springs. It first opened its doors in 1962 and eventually evolved into a 250-acre recreational facility that was made open to the public. The property went by several different names over the years, including Discovery Water Park, Rockahupla Water Park, and Lake Dolores Water Park. These names reflect buyers and other owners' numerous attempts to rebrand and reopen the site, and bad luck seemed to plague the business. Each time someone tried to clean up the water park's image in hopes of drawing a resurgence of visitors, it seems like something got in the way. Byers held onto the business until 1990, when he sold it to an investment group who upgraded the equipment and reimagined the park with a 1950s theme. But their luck wasn't any better than his. After operating for just 3 seasons and accumulating copious amounts of debt, the park closed yet again. One more buyer tried and failed to turn the site into a success, and the property has been closed since 2004. The weathered, graffiti-covered equipment and buildings left behind are not only an eyesore, they are also said to be dangerous. There are rumors that the park will reopen yet again, but this hasn't happened. As of September, the property was listed on the market for $11 million. If you happen to be in the market for an abandoned, bad luck-plagued desert water park. Gates to the underworld. In ancient Greece, when a loved one passed, it was believed they were taken to the underworld, or Hades, the realm of the dead. In some Greek myths and legends, heroes have even tried to go there in order to bring back a special person to the land of the living. The most famous of them is Orpheus, who managed to get all the way there to find not his wife, but an apparition of her, presented by the gods to mock him for trying to save her. But where would Orpheus have had to travel in order to get there? It's thought that what the ancient Greeks believed was the gate to the underworld was most likely the Alipotripa cave, which in fact is a real place with some surprising history behind it. Located in Mani, Greece, the cave is huge, measuring almost 1,000 feet in length. Even more remarkable than that, hundreds of prehistoric people would have lived here as a community based on everything that archaeologists have found. However, in a grisly turn of events, one day around 5,000 years ago, everything changed. An earthquake led to the entrance of the cave collapsing, meaning that everyone inside was buried alive. It seems like the gate to the underworld lived up to its name after all. The Michilimackinac Fort. The Michilimackinac Fort in Michigan may look like a reconstructed trading village from the 18th century, and it is. But hiding underneath it is an active archaeological site. Excavations began here in 1959 and have never ended. The fort is home to one of the longest active archaeology programs in North America. Every summer is archaeology season, with over 1 million artifacts unearthed over the past 6 decades. Most of the treasures aren't that mysterious. Archaeologists have found things like an engraved Jesuit trade ring, a structural post from the original 1715 fort, a brass sleeve button, a side plate for a British gun, and more 18th century items. However, the site is still one of the most interesting places in Michigan, both an open excavation and a reconstructed historic village. The fortress was originally constructed by French soldiers in 1715. It quickly turned into a fortified community and a main trading center for furs in the Northwest. Then, in 1781, the fortress was relocated to Mackinac Island. It was used as a sort of base camp for British and French explorers venturing into the vast unknown of the American West. But there's a secret here as well. The area was occupied long before the French ever showed up. There may not have been a fortress here, but the nomadic Native Americans were living on the land as far back as 1000 BC. Thanks for watching! What kind of crazy archaeological sites do you think could be hiding in plain sight in your own neighborhood? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!